I'm really, really pleased to be able to invite Ron Deal tonight. He's known all over the country. He's a family therapist. He's an international conference speaker. He specializes in many things. Among them is step family education. He's one of the most widely read and referenced authors on blended families in North America. And it's such a pleasure to have him here with us tonight. So Ron, open your audio and your video, and I'll turn it over to you. Thank you so much. We are looking forward to it.
It's an honor to be with you all tonight. I've been looking forward to this for a very long time. So thank you for having me. I bring you greetings from the ministry of FamilyLife, originally started right here in Little Rock, Arkansas, where I'm located. FamilyLife recently moved to Orlando. We're a part of CRU, Campus Crusade for Christ, as many of you know it. And FamilyLife is an international ministry, been around for 47, 48 years, a national radio program, FamilyLife Today. We have a footprint in over 100 countries around the world, and we essentially try to help families grow in the Lord, grow with the Lord, and represent Him one generation to the next, which you're obviously invested in as well. And that's very exciting because I want to talk to you about that. You'll notice our title is Grandparenting, a guide for blended families and those who love them. You might be sitting there thinking, we're not a blended, are we a blended family? I don't think we're not a step family, are we? No, and you may not be. Well, but maybe you might be connected in terms of the generations and a part of a blended family. 115 million Americans have a step relationship. 115 million. And we estimate that another 100 million Americans know and love somebody who does have a step relationship. So it might not be you or your household, but it might be your grandkids. It might be your brother or your sister or someone that's near and dear to you, even within the family of faith, for example. So what I want us to do tonight is talk about this reality of step families in America and talk about what your role can be as a grandparent, perhaps a step grandparent, connected to people who are living in a blended family situation. Well, first of all, let me just say, I gave you one stat. There's some more stats. There's a reason I like to say that the non-traditional family is the new traditional family, because it is so common. 40% of all parents raising children in the US today, 40% of parents raising children have a step relationship. One of those parents is a step parent to a child in their household. 35%, I just mentioned, of every man, woman, and child in the United States. And the prediction is that half of us will have a step relationship at some point in our lifetime. It may not be of something you chose, but it could have been because of a choice of somebody else, could have been because of a death. We'll get into some of that. You might find yourself living in this reality. Nearly 40% of U.S. families today have a step-grandparent right now. But look at this, within 8 years, by 2030, Americans will have one step-grandchild for every 1.5, 1.7 biological grandchildren. It is going to be extremely common very, very soon across our nation. And of course, grandparents, as you know, I'm sure you've talked about this here on Grand Monday nights, you have such an incredible opportunity to bring stability in the midst of unwanted transition, in the midst of difficulty, in the midst of death or divorce or breakup or an unwanted pregnancy or whatever the story is. Grandparents can be that solidifying factor that kind of come in and provide stability when other parts of the family are having some unwanted transition. And I don't want you to ever underestimate your power, your ability in particular to provide stability in the life of your grandchildren who are having to face some circumstances that they didn't ask for. That's one of the lessons that I think you're going to pick up tonight. Now, let's just talk about some of the realities of grandparenting and step-grandparenting. Let me do it in the form of showing you some pictures. So this is what we call a genogram. You can see Rick and Cindy were married and they had 2 kids, but Rick was tragically killed in a car accident. Since that time, Cindy has married a man named Larry, and they've gotten married, and she's now pregnant. So real quickly, you can see that Cindy and Larry's the stepfather to Amy and Amanda. See how that works? They're expecting a child together. It's going to be a boy. So let's just imagine for a minute what it would be like to be Rick's parents. These are Rick's parents, grandparents to Amy and Amanda. Do you think they're still invested in Amy and Amanda's life? Their son has died. You bet they're still invested. You think they still want to be in the mix in terms of their world and their life and what's going on? Absolutely. In fact, they may have a wonderful relationship with their granddaughters. Now, let me ask this question. Their daughter-in-law, Cindy, has now married another man and is pregnant. Do you think Rick's parents are going to be just as invested in this new grandson as they are in Amy and Amanda's life? I don't know. Actually, it could go either way. Perhaps they're deeply invested in Cindy's life still, even though she's married to somebody else. And that new child's important to Amy and Amanda. So perhaps Rick's parents are still very invested. Maybe they're going to develop a relationship with this child, but it could also be that they feel a little distant, a little marginalized. It could be that since Rick's death, Cindy has sort of backed away from Rick's parents, and they're finding it hard to get time with Amy and Amanda, let alone the new child. There's a number of dynamics there that could be in play. What about Cindy's parents? Are they as invested in Amy and Amanda as they are in the new baby? Absolutely. I think they probably will be because their daughter is mother to all of them. So they're still deeply invested. Well, what about Larry's parents? Larry's parents, are they going to be invested in this new grandson when he comes? You betcha. They're going to be right there. But what about Amy and Amanda? Wow, what is that like for Larry's parents to, because of a choice that Larry and Cindy made to get married, all of a sudden they are step-grandparents to Amy and Amanda? What does that mean for them? What if Amy is not really interested in having another set of grandparents in her life? She's got two. Her dad's parents, her mom's parents. What if she's really invested there and with her friends and in her social world, and she just doesn't have a lot of time for Larry's parents? Maybe they have good intentions and a big heart and they're reaching out, but she's not really open. What do they do then? Well, this is just one example of a blended family, 3 generations. Now notice, this is what we call a simple step family because there's only one household. Cindy and Larry's household, we should say. Now there's grandparents, but there's one household and there's 2 adults raising these 3 children. Let's look at another configuration that's possible. Jason, Katrina, the dotted line means they didn't marry, but they had a child, Tamra. They've broken up. They're not together anymore. Jason is now dating Alicia. She doesn't have any children. She was married before to Scott. They got a divorce. Since they don't really have children, my guess is Scott's pretty much out of the picture. He's not really going to be involved in Alicia's life. But Alicia and Jason are dating. Now imagine if they are to get married, this will create a blended family for Tamra with 2 households, her dad's house and her stepmom Alicia. And Tamra will, of course, go to her mom's house, Katrina. Well, then there's grandparents. Katrina's parents are up here. Jason's parents, they divorced when he was young. They've each married somebody else, and so he's grown up with step-parents himself. And then Alicia, she has grandparents. Now this blended family is a little bit more complex than the last one. We have 3 adults, Alicia, Jason, and Katrina, parenting the one child. We have 2 households, and we've got 1, 2, 3, 4 sets of grandparents. That gets a little complicated when birthdays and Christmas comes around, right? 4 sets, all buying gifts, wanting some time. When can you be with us? Lots of questions. Jason and Alicia are going to have to try to navigate all that space. Let's look at another blended family. We'll look at this one in depth. Most blended families today are very complex, like the one we're about to look at. Maybe you can relate to this. So Susie met a guy named John. They met and married and had 3 children, Mary, Mike, and John Jr. But as life would have it, unfortunately, they divorced. Another part of the universe is Bob and his wife Betty. They too met and married, had 2 kids, Ted and Carrie. They too got a divorce. Since that time, Betty has married Frank. That's her second husband. And Bob has married Susie. So all of a sudden, these separate lives and separate households are all sort of merging. And you can begin to see really quickly that they're connected now. Now, a lot of people, when they get married, they're not really sure how connected they really are, but they're more connected than they know. Let me show you what I mean. When Susie married Bob, she knew he had parents, and so she was going to get a mother-in-law and a father-in-law. But what she didn't quite fully embrace or understand is she was also going to get what I like to call an ex-wife-in-law. All of a sudden, Betty is now a part of Susie's life and family. Well, like Betty lives with them? No. Betty doesn't live with them. They don't want Betty living with them. No, it's more like Betty's connected to Bob because of their children, and they have to raise these children together. And so Betty can pick up the phone and call Bob and tell him that she's not paying that medical bill. And all of a sudden, Bob has to call Susie and say, honey, we've got a battle on our hands. We've got to decide whether we're going to go to court over this or not. Otherwise, we're going to have to pay it. So Betty influences Bob and Susie's finances. Betty can pick up the phone and change Bob's mood. Just he was happy and had a good day, and all of a sudden Betty calls and he has a bad day. He's in a bad mood, he's upset, and then he comes home and he's grumpy with Susie and her kids. And so all of a sudden Susie realizes that her children are impacted by Betty, who lives in another home. But emotionally, she's connected. Betty has a husband, Frank. He's not a biological parent to any of these 5 children, but Frank, who happens to be not a nice guy, pretty mean and grumpy, who he is, his character, impacts Ted and Carrie, and that affects who they are when they come over to their stepmom's house and they're interacting with Susie's children. So all of a sudden, Susie realizes one day that her kids are impacted by Bob's ex-wife's new husband. And what does she do about that? Susie can complain to her husband and say, hey, listen, would you call your ex-wife and have her tell Frank to be nice? Now, I think I just heard somebody laughing through the internet. Yeah, that's funny, all right. It's kind of difficult, sad, and yet it's funny because there's no way that Susie can tell Bob to tell her to tell Frank to be nice. Like, that's not going to happen. So what do? Well, they've got to live with the reality. And by the way, it just occurs to me, we're going to add the grandparents here in just a minute, but some of you are Bob and Susie. You've gotten married a little bit later in life, or maybe in midlife, and you have adult children or, and maybe grandchildren. There may be 4 generations that are impacted. So you may be relating to some of this stuff going on with Bob and Susie. Well, Bob also got an ex-husband-in-law in John, who John is as the biological parent to Mary, Mike, and John Jr. He can say to his son, Mike, hey, listen, buddy, I'm your dad. Bob is not your dad. Don't listen to anything he has to say. And all of a sudden, Bob has a harder time being a stepdad to Mike simply because of John's relational influence. Well, you can begin to see they're all connected. Susie and Bob, they're trying to build a family. She has primary custody of her 3 kids, but every other weekend and 6 weeks in the summer, they spend time with their dad, John. Betty has custody of her 2 kids, and on occasion, Bob and Susie have all 5. So we have different configurations based on the day, the weekend, whatever that might be. Well, then we have relationships with grandparents, right? Bob's parents, Susie's parents, they divorced later in life. So in their mid-50s, they called it quits and went their separate ways. And now Susie has a new stepdad, that's kind of strange to say, and a new stepmom, and she's just getting to know them herself. Now, John's got a set of parents and Betty's got a set of parents. They divorced when she was very young, so she grew up with step-parents. And then there's Frank's grandparents. So let's just count real quick. We have 3 households. We have 5 adults parenting 5 children. and 7 sets of grandparents, 14 grandparents. I did a podcast recently, the Family Life Blended podcast, and I interviewed a couple that on their wedding day, they had 22 grandparents connected to their children. 22. How do you do that at Christmas? They got 7 sets. How are Bob and Susie going to navigate all of these grandparents who all want time and energy and investment and want to contribute to the birthday party or the whatever? Like, it's a lot of moving parts. But that's not all, because see, Bob and Susie have a marriage that they're trying to solidify. They're also parents, so they're trying to figure out how to be a parent and step-parent team to each other's children. Betty and Frank have the same thing. They're a married couple, and they're also trying to be parents together. Betty and Bob have what we call a co-parent ex-spouse relationship. Susie and John also have that ongoing co-parent relationship. They still have to talk. They have to coordinate efforts around raising those children. Well, there's a sibling group. Bob has a relationship with his 2 kids that he had like for a couple of years as a single dad. Susie was a single mom for a couple of years. They definitely have rhythms and schedules and traditions that they've developed over time. Now, Bob's trying to bring Susie into that equation, and Susie's trying to bring Bob into that equation. And then we have relationships, old ones and new ones. So the yellow represents the new relationships, and the teal colored arrows, they represent more of the old established relationships. So for example, Susie and her children have really strong biological, tight-knit relationships, and she does with her parents as well. But her kids are also developing a relationship with their stepdad. They're trying to figure that out while navigating their relationship with their biological dad. Susie's also trying to get to know a stepdad and a stepmother. That's sort of odd and strange for her, but she's trying to figure it out, right? So Ted and Carrie have obviously relationships with their biological mom, Betty, and their dad, Bob, but developing relationship with stepmom and developing with their stepdad. And then they have biological relationships with their grandparents, and they're also trying to figure out the step-grandparent relationships. Now, here's the thing. On day 1, when this couple gets married, all of this goes into motion at the same time. All of it. And they've got to navigate this. Now, Bob and Susie are in love with one another, but all of this, what we call complexity, is challenging. And it puts stress on couples' relationships. And this is true if you get married later in life and all your children are adults, and you have grandchildren and now step-grandchildren. Guess what? All 3 generations have to begin to deal with the new relationships. And how do we do Christmas? And what are our traditions? What do we keep? What are we going to make that's new? Well, I don't want to change that tradition. Well, I think we have to. Well, what if we don't want to? So all of a sudden you have all these dynamics happening at once. It adds a lot of stress on marriages. If you pinned me down and you said, why is the divorce rate higher for couples in blended families? I'd go, well, just look. That's it. What we do at Family Life Blended, by the way, is help people navigate that terrain, understand it, make sense of it, and figure out what they can do about it and what they cannot do about it, what they have to learn to live with. But here's the thing I want you to notice. Let's just go back to the basic structure. Let's imagine that you are Bob's parents right up here. You're deeply invested in your son, Bob. You're invested in Ted and Carrie. They are your grandchildren. And now all of a sudden, you now have 3 new step-grandchildren. Well, what is that like for them and for you? How do you navigate that space? How do you make a new relationship? How do you grow it? What if Mary's 25? She doesn't need any more grandparents. She's living life and got a career, and maybe she's 16 and it's just an awkward time in her world and in her life. Or maybe she's 6. We got 6, 5, and 4. They're really young and they're just sort of wide open. They love anybody who comes along. You see, the age and the circumstances under which you come into their life is going to make a difference in bonding and how that develops. What if you are Susie's dad and stepmother? And number one, stepmother and stepdaughter are trying to figure out how to get along and what that relationship's going to be like. But then obviously you're also trying to build a relationship with these kids. Some step-grandmothers find that if they build a relationship with the grandkids first, then their parent starts liking them even more. Like you build a relationship with your daughter-in-law through the grandchildren. Sometimes that works, sometimes it doesn't. Susie's definitely the gatekeeper. If you're this dad and stepmother, if you're the stepmom and Susie says, no, I don't think I want you spending time with my kids, guess what? You're not going to be able to spend much time with those step-grandchildren. You're going to have to build a relationship with her first and get permission from the gatekeeper before you're ever going to get access to them. Then you're also trying to develop a relationship with Bob and Ted and Carrie. And how do you do that? You see, it's a lot of work. What if they live a long ways away? How do you do the long distance thing? Let me jump way over here. What if you're Frank's parents? Now, again, Frank is not biologically related to any of the 5 children, but he's definitely an influence. He's in Ted and Carrie's world. And vicariously, because of that, he's also influencing what's going on with Mary, Mike, and John Jr. If you're Frank's parents, are you invested in these children? I've known people who said, "Nah, I want to golf. I raised my kids. I did my life." Well, what if they want to be invested in you? Or what if you try and like nobody likes your son, Frank? I'm sorry, nobody likes him. And so it's kind of hard for them to open up to you because of what's going on with him. Like, so you have to recognize, here's my point. There are realities and things you can do and things you can't do. There's certain dynamics at play and it's very complex. Sometimes it seems simple to you. Why can't we just reach Ted and have a relationship? And yet when you begin to look at it, there's a lot going on that you don't get to be in control of. And you have to learn how to play the game. You have to play along with that. So let me just in the last few minutes I have give you some quick pointers, some quick tips, some applications coming right out of that we've already talked about. First of all, I just want to say grieve forward. Everything we just pointed out there acknowledges that there's some grief. Your grief, children's grief, your son or daughter-in-law, whatever that story is. We're all grieving. And it's helpful if you keep grieving yourself. It's helpful if you will keep doing your part to grieve along with them. So you're going to try to grieve forward with the children, with yourself, and grieve in a way that's healthy and helpful. I talked recently with a couple, I'll just call them David and Paulette. They lost their 32-year-old daughter to cancer. She had a child with her husband. She's gone. Right? They're grieving deeply for the loss of their daughter. A few years go by, their son-in-law marries again, and now there's a stepmother to their granddaughter. And they're wanting to continue their relationship with their granddaughter, but they've also got to try to get to know this new woman in her life, and they want to try to help the granddaughter and the stepmom build a relationship, but they're not exactly sure how. Do we have permission? Is this something we can speak into? What if they don't want us? Lots of good questions. Everybody needs to keep grieving forward, and trying to do that together is about stepping into people's lives and talking about this and trying to bring some definition. That's point number 2. Bring definition to the ambiguity of your relationships. DTR means define the relationship. We used to tell people that when they were dating. Define the relationship. Are we seriously dating, or are we just sort of casually dating? Are we getting engaged? What's this all about? Same thing's true in blended families, especially in the beginning. You have to talk to people and try to figure out what kind of relationship they're looking for, hoping for, and the kind of relationship that you want. Number 3 will help with that. Ask your adult children how you can be helpful to them. Remember, they're the gatekeepers. If they don't want you spending time with the grandchildren, you're not going to be able to. If you don't know what's helpful for them, imagine Bob and Susie and you're having a conversation and you say, you know what, I think it's probably pretty complex. Maybe you have some questions you don't know how to answer about your blended family. You're right, that's exactly right. Well, we're wondering how we can be helpful to you as in this season of your family's life. That does wonders for them, that you understand, that you're trying to appreciate what they're going through and come alongside them rather than just sort of sitting back and aloof. It's helpful if you get in there. Be open to new people and then try to be equitable with your time, your talent, and your treasure. Be open to new people. You may not have chosen some of these people. If you're Frank's parents, you didn't choose any of those kids. You didn't ask them to come into your life. Frank made a choice, and therefore now they're here. Be open to those new people. When people are closed and they go, well, not mine, all of a sudden that just creates walls and barriers, and that hurts feelings. Far better for you to be open and say, yeah, let's get to know each other. Let's start building a friendship and figure out how we're going to be family with one another. Being equitable with time, talent, and treasure is about not buying your biological grandchildren a $100 gift for birthday and then buying your step-grandchildren a $10 gift. I know that just sounds awful, doesn't it? It happens quite a bit. We have people writing into our ministry all the time asking, what do I do about that? The adult children trying to figure out how to address their parent and say, please don't do that. You're showing favoritism. Yeah, but I don't even know that step-grandchild. I don't have a relationship. They're brand new to me, but this child I do have. I get it. There is a stronger bond with your biological grandchildren. And yet, if you show favoritism with time, talent, and treasure, it creates walls and divides and hurts feelings, and it doesn't help their family come together over time. You can be a part of helping them come together. Communicate your desire for a relationship with the children and the grandchildren. Let them know that you're interested in getting to know them. Now, sometimes they may be in a season where they just don't have a lot of time to give back to you. Maybe they're older, adolescents, or maybe young adults. They got college, they got career, they got things on their mind, and they just don't have a lot of time. Okay, that's all right. You can sit back and try to be really patient. That's number 6. Be patient with that bonding process. They have to meet you in the middle. That's always the way relationships work. From a new friendship to somebody that you fall in love with, you have to meet in the middle. And if they're not as interested in the relationship as you are, well, you're going to have to slow down a little bit. I mean, those are hard realities at times, and yet that's the way you're going to be able to move forward. And then last thing, don't let woulda, coulda, shoulda keep you from loving and leading. Every once in a while we hear from people who say, I made some mistakes in my life. I committed some sins, and it's cost me some things with my family. Maybe it led to a divorce. Maybe it led to some difficulty and some heartache among family members. It doesn't help when somebody sits back, especially a parent, and woulda, coulda, shouldas their child about what they did and shouldn't have done. And there's a lot of judgment in that. And now I'm not going to embrace your new family because of the decisions you made back then. Yeah, no, that's not really helpful. It doesn't really help them feel forgiven. It just keeps judgment on the table and no mercy. And I think we need to love mercy. I think we need to go big on mercy because that's what our Lord has done for us. So find a way to wrestle with whatever that history was. But don't let that get in the way of you loving somebody new in your life now. A couple of resources that we've developed. You can see a whole bunch of books. I want to point out just a couple of them real quick. You can see the Smart Step Family Guide to Financial Planning. Some of you who may be married later in life, you're looking at making some decisions about the future and inheritance. We wrote a whole book on how to try to help people understand estate planning as it relates to blended families and how you navigate just the daily money issues with a blended family. The Smart Step Family book, this is sort of the big Bible, if you will, that people call that, that gives you lots of information about step family living. We've got a video series that goes along with that. And then this Building Love Together book that Barb talked about a little while ago. Really, really helpful, very straightforward. We're going to send you the chapter on grandparenting. And if you like that, let me encourage you to pick up the copy just so you can learn as much as you can about blended family. Whether that's your life or you're just the grandparent, step-grandparent trying to love and care for somebody who is, I want to encourage you to be a part of that. And then there's this. We too have a summit that we do called the Summit on Step Family Ministry. It's in October, and we move it around the country. It's going to be in the Phoenix area this coming year. And it's just an opportunity for people who want to invest in other blended families in their church and community. If you want to learn more about ministry in a local church, come be a part of that event. These are a couple of websites where you can get a hold of us and learn all about all the things we're doing, the virtual training we're doing, workshops and so on and so forth. As Barb's coming back on, let me just say thank you so much for the opportunity to be with you today, and it's been a lot of fun, and I look forward to some of your questions. Barb?
Well, so Ron, if you want to go ahead and open your audio and video again, I'm going over here to the Q&A, and you know what I'm seeing tonight is I am seeing just lots of thank yous. And that's awesome. So, there's people that are saying, thank you, you helped us with our blended family. And now we are step-grandparents. So you've been around helping them a long time. Rhonda says, Rhonda Stoppy, who actually will be a speaker at our summit. We had her on Grand Monday nights a while back, really enjoyed her. Rhonda, I met you at FamilyLife in 2016 when I was there being interviewed for one of my books. And I remember how excited you were then to tell me all about the blended family ministry. So it's amazing to see how God has grown this ministry to help countless blended families. I mean, you've just given us some sense of the magnitude of the amount of blended families there are in this country, and then the issues that can occur. So she said, thank you. Zorik Jones, you don't have grandchildren, do you? I don't think
No,
you're
I
a
do.
grandfather yet. Close?
I'm not.
Okay.
Close.
Okay.
Well,
Yeah.
I mean, I don't know. My son
I don't know if you're close.
is married. We'll find out.
Yeah, it's not exactly something you can always ask. Well, anyway, he wanted to know how old they were, but just in a couple of minutes left then, as opposed to, I don't see any more questions on there unless I missed some of the chat, but I asked you when we chatted by phone just a bit about how this all evolved for you. Could you just take a minute and tell us how God directed you to this ministry?
Well, there's a lot of people in the world who do things professionally that they have not ever lived through. And I'm mindful that a lot of the people watching tonight are in that camp of, well, we're not a blended family, but we love and care for people who are. Well, that's my story too. I started out as a youth minister, and honestly, 35 years later, I think I'm still doing youth ministry. I'm just doing it by helping their parents keep their marriages together, manage life, deal with the complexity of their world, and bring stability, in particular to children who have already been through some hard things. A parent died, somebody divorced, something has happened that has now led to a situation where they're in a step family. And we want to try to help them have a healthy family from this point forward. Let God come in and redeem what has happened. That's what God does. So I started down this journey of youth ministry that led to marriage and family ministry that led me to become a family therapist. I found myself working with a lot of step families, and 30 years ago I decided to sort of try to do some ministry to step families to try to help prevent problems, not just fix them. And one thing led to another, and now I'm doing this every day with FamilyLife Blended. Our division of FamilyLife is the largest blended ministry in the world. So we have a lot in front of us and a long way to go,
Yeah. It's only growing, isn't it? As you said, the amount of step families, step related children, grandchildren, grandparents is only going to increase over the years. So we just want to thank you for the work you're doing. Thank you for the information that you share. It's really helpful. So we encourage people to go to FamilyLife.com and take a look at some of those resources. In particular, if you go to the Legacy store, you will see the book that Ron has referenced, which I found to be extremely helpful. And I think you will too. So thank you so much for joining us. We really appreciate it. And God continue to bless you, Ron.
Thank you.